at the weather forecast. Peter.
Thank you, Assad. It's already started to rain in a few places, and tonight the weather will just get wetter and wetter. Probably enough rain to cause us some flooding. Now, it looks as though the wettest weather will be to the southwest of London, generally around 10 to 15 millimetres of rain there, but one or two places could get as much as 25 millimetres of rain or an inch. By the afternoon, though, the rain will have gone, the sun will be shining, and then after dark tomorrow, some showers will slip down towards us from the Midlands. But as the wind blows more and more from the north tomorrow night, those showers will turn wintry over Essex. Feeling particularly cold in the wind on Saturday, less cold on Sunday, but by then, it'll be raining again. Assad.
And yet more rain tonight, Peter. Thank you. Well, that's it for this evening from everyone on the BBC London Late team. To have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Good evening. Well, there's a few early signs of spring in the garden at the moment, and nothing too much, I don't think, in the early days of February to put off those spring shoots too much. Through tonight, we have an area of low pressure sitting across northern Scotland, bringing outbreaks of rain and some hill snow. A rather bigger weather system pushing in across southern parts of the UK, just sliding across, bringing some outbreaks of rain, which will be heavy at times across southern coastal counties of England, pushing up across Wales into the Midlands as well. And yes, that is a little bit of wintriness across the tops of the Welsh hills. More likely to see snow perhaps across the Scottish mountains above about 300 metres or 1,000 feet. On into the busy time tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning, and a few showers across the Pennines. Further south, still that more persistent rain through the Midlands, and particularly into the southeast, areas to the south of London, a pretty wet start to the day. Further west, though, already the overnight rain showing signs of beginning to ease off, but a lot of puddles left on the road, I suspect. And of course, all these areas pretty soggy already, so we'll just have to keep an eye on the flood warnings by the end of the night. Across Wales, though, things already beginning to improve, the rain moving away, some brighter spells breaking through. But across Northern Ireland, fairly brisk winds here, lighter winds generally elsewhere, but fairly brisk winds from the west, bringing in cloud, bringing outbreaks of rain. Not a pleasant start to the day, and you can still see quite a bit of rain across a good part of Scotland as well, along with some patchy hill snow, but also the risk of some icy patches where skies have cleared for any length of time overnight, so watch out for that. Otherwise, through the morning, the rain in the south clearing away pretty smartly. Good sunny spells following on behind that. The rain also moving out of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but moving on to affect a good part of northwest England and North Wales. So quite dull, grey and damp here through the afternoon. Temperatures across the north, 4 to 6 degrees typically, 7, 8, 9 degrees in the south. So that's about right for the early part of February. A lot colder though on Saturday for most of us, but generally the brighter day of the weekend. Quite crisp. Sunday, more in the way of cloud and some patchy rain beginning to move in. But really quite a nice, bright, sunny day for many of us on Saturday. 1 or 2 snow showers running down these eastern coastal counties, which could give a covering in places, maybe an inch or two at most. Temperatures looking like this on the thermometer, 2 or 3 degrees in the east, but feeling more like -1 to -3. It really will be a pretty raw wind. By Sunday, though, that wind's easing off. More in the way of cloud generally, I think. Some patchy outbreaks of rain tending to move through. Many places dry though, and temperatures beginning to bounce back between 8 and 10 degrees. More details of your weekend weather to be found, of course, online. But that's it from me. Bye-bye.
Phil Daniels and propping up the buffet car Admiral Lord West. All after Question Time on BBC One. Choo choo!
Yes, tickets at the ready for Andrew Neil in an hour. And we make the journey to Lancaster first on BBC One. Waiting for us is David Dimbleby.
Tonight we're in the splendid town hall of Lancaster, and welcome to Question Time. Good evening, and a welcome, of course, to our audience here in Lancaster and to our panel, the Foreign Office Minister, Saeeda Warsi, Labour's former Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, the Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams, the novelist and writer for The Spectator, James Delingpole, and the comedian, Dom Jolly. Good, and let's get cracking. The questions, of course, provided by our audience and not known to our panellists until they hear them read out. The first one from Arsenal Hack, please.
Is reducing the travelling time from Manchester to London worth £30 billion?
The expenditure on the new rail system of £30 billion, is it worth it just to reduce the travelling time to Manchester from London, Alan Johnson?
If it was just that, maybe not, but it's about much more than that. Listen, there hasn't been a new railway built towards the north of England for well over 100 years. In fact, the only new rail line anywhere in the last 150 years was High Speed 1. Which is now very successful, incidentally. This is about capacity. Yes, it increases the speed at which you can travel north, and that's very important. But our creaking Victorian rail system, thank goodness the Victorians did that for us, put that infrastructure in, had the foresight to do it 200 years ago. We need now to have the foresight to recognise that we have a 19th century rail system in a 21st century economy. At the time of Dr. Beeching, those of you old enough might remember, in the early 60s, it was felt that we had to manage decline on the railways. They boomed, and they will boom even more if we can ensure we have the correct capacity.
But the travelling time is the thing. The travelling time is
the travelling time is an issue.
Does it really get to be that much faster? Does it matter if you can get to Birmingham 20 minutes faster?
It's going to be another hour and 8 minutes to get to Manchester. It'll increase the time. It will decrease the time it takes to get to Leeds. This is important stuff, and from then on, further north. But the main issue is about capacity. If we don't get capacity in, we'll spend that much money repairing an antiquated Victorian system when other countries are well ahead of us in bringing their rail services up to date.
All right, let's hear from a member Alred straight away. Yes.
Rather than spending billions on a new rail infrastructure, surely it's better to spend the money sorting out the current rolling stock and focusing on the fact that there are people in this country commuting to work spending thousands of pounds on train fare to stand all the way there and all the way back.
Dom Jolly, do you agree with that?
I absolutely, I'm slightly worried because James Dellingpole is nodding with me, but I totally agree with you. I live in the Cotswolds, and when I go into London, I go from a place called Kemble to London, and as far as I can work out, I think I'm the sort of person that turns up on the day. I don't get a season ticket because I don't work regularly, and when I turn up, I think it is mile per mile the most expensive railway journey in the world. And I love the fact that we're going to get this high-speed railway. I've been to Japan, I've been on the Shinkansen, I've been on the TGVs in France 20 years ago, but it kind of feels a bit... It's all over, really. I mean, it's kind of like we're sort of investing in the Walkman when the iPod's already going. And I think in a big country, over 400 miles, say, something like these high-speed trains are really important. But in England, I don't think we need them. Let's invest in the sort of the railway stock we've already got, and let's get it back with a company that actually owns the whole thing together and makes it work properly. It's crazy.
And it also strikes me that it's kind of 20 years too late because telecommunications have moved on so fast that most people now can actually do things by their computers. They don't need to catch a train.
OK. Saeed Abbasi, it doesn't seem that popular with this audience, £1,000 a household spent on this.
I'm very much supportive of what Alan has said, because it's not just the journey time between London and the north, it's actually the journey time between the northern cities. So if you take, for example, Leeds to Birmingham, that journey time will be halved. If you take the journey times between Leeds to Manchester, Birmingham to Manchester, it'll be the interconnectivity. And it can't be right, I think, like Alan said, that it's been over 100 years since there's been any major rail infrastructure in the north of England. This will have huge benefits for connectivity.
It's going to be a hard sell, because we're in the north of England here in Lancaster, and you saw universal applause for the point Dom Jolly made, that there are better things you can do with the money.
I think Dom makes some really important points in relation to rolling stock. Of course, we have to invest in that. He makes important points in relation to pricing. He makes important points in relation to the quality and standing on lots of important points. But I also think, look, there's never been a major infrastructure project, even if you go back to when the Victorians were building railways. In fact, somebody at the time, a doctor at the time, said that we mustn't have fast trains because it would stop people from breathing on them, from breathing within those trains. So there will always be people who will criticise.
Arguing that.
No, but there will.
To be fair, if you've been on First Grace Western, there are times where it's so full you can't breathe.
But I think, look, there will always be concerns about what this will do for the environment, whether this is good value for money. But if we're concerned about the fact that we are 10 years behind or 20 years behind what's happening in Japan, we can't be sat here in 10 years' time saying, well, we actually didn't do anything. This is absolutely vital infrastructure.
We'll be 40 years
and the
behind,
North will see the benefits of it, and that's why I'm hugely
We're going to be 40 years
supportive of it.
behind Japan, aren't we? Because it's going to be 20 years from now before it's online. I'll come to members of the audience in a moment, but James Delingpole.
So we've got the political class, represented by Alan and Saida, versus the ordinary people. It seems that the political class want their grand projet to dump on the British people, costing us 30 billion. Well, I'm sure that's just an underestimate. I'm sure it's going to go far above that. I was on the train on the way here, and there was an incredibly annoying person sitting opposite me on his mobile, running his... Dom, it wasn't you. It wasn't you. He was running his office on his mobile. He was doing sort of executive boast speak. He was sounding like David Brent, briefing his staff, buoying up his sales team. It was very annoying, but this is how people operate these days. They use the train for the internet and stuff. It doesn't matter whether
they just, instead of having an office, go backwards and forwards.
They use the train as their office. It doesn't matter if they can get from Manchester to London in 10 seconds, I believe is the latest
So why do you
figure
think the political class, as you put it, want this and other people don't? I mean, what's
because
the merit?
they're stuck for what to do with our failing economy, and they think that maybe on the Keynesian principle you have these big projects, these big capital spending projects which are going to improve the economy.
And do you not agree with that? Because many people say that is the right thing
I agree with
to do.
Dom, despite his cheap shot earlier on. I think we should upgrade our existing stock. It's what the people want.
You, sir, up there.
Perhaps before we start spending such a vast amount of money on reducing travelling times between Manchester and London, we should spend some money on creating some business in the north of England to get this part of the country back to work.
The woman in yellow there.
This is just wrong. It'll make matters worse. I mean, it could even drain away jobs from the north because it will just make it faster for people to get from the northwest down to London. What we need is investment in this region. At the moment, it takes you nearly as long to get from Lancaster to Liverpool as it does to get from Lancaster to London. And what about... the north doesn't finish at Manchester. It actually barely starts.
Zoe Williams.
Well, I was always instinctively in favour of HS2 because Lord Astor said it was a horrible idea devised by northern MPs because they were jealous of the Chilterns. They obviously took that to heart and said, OK, we'll have it in the north and then everybody can have their landscape spoilt. And that's apparently garnered cross-party support for it. The fact is, nobody ever likes new infrastructure, but nobody ever, with the exception of the Millennium Dome, complains about infrastructure once it's been built. So you've got to, on some level, think about the upsides. It's always very easy to see the downsides of everything, but actually 100,000 jobs wouldn't go amiss, and that would be like investing in the north.
And you reckon it would be 100,000 jobs?
But that's what they estimate.
They say, yes. What do you think?
I think that if we don't invest in the infrastructure now, we're going to have to invest in infrastructure at some point in the future. If this government doesn't invest, then a government in the future is going to have to. And sooner or later, the Victorian Railways are going to break down, they're going to stop working. They're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to fix them anymore.
But this project only deals with the certain places it's going to, because it's so high speed, it only stops about 4 places in the country. What about everyone else that can't get on those trains?
But it takes the high... The whole point of this is you can repair the current infrastructure, but it doesn't give you the additional capacity. The whole point of this is you move people around more quickly between cities and incidentally stop them taking short-haul flights to Manchester and Leeds, etc. And at the same time, you can then improve the current infrastructure. Your problem that you said, Don, was, and the lady in the audience mentioned, was absolutely right. This is not, we do the high-speed 2 and we don't do anything about rolling stock. We do the high-speed 2, we don't do anything about businesses in the north. And most business people, I'm a northern MP in Hull, most business people tell me that a crucial aspect of businesses relocating in the north is the travel distances. And of course, the north is much further than Manchester, Manchester, but once you get the connection to Manchester and Leeds, you get the connections further to the rest of the country much more quickly.
Can I just ask you what I asked Saida? Are you surprised that there's such almost universal hostility here in Lancaster to the project?
I'm surprised because I've always respected the intelligence and goodwill of the people of Lancaster.
All right, I take one last point from the woman there.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Alan Johnson, really, because I'm from Hull as well. But, like,
Will you come over tonight for this, then?
But I can see,
How long did it
like,
take you?
how it would improve transport in the north, because for me now, it takes like 4 hours to get home from Lancaster. I think with those fast connections there, it allows improvements, continual improvements, not just
But there's not going to be a fast
initial.
line between Lancaster and Hull.
It'll always be expensive on the big one.
Oh, there will be a fast line between Lancaster and Hull.
Make sure.
That's
We've just added it now.
I see, okay,
We've got a
just
hot
added
air
it.
balloon,
All right.
it'll take you over.
You come to question time and get your way, you see, with the man... Well, he's not the man in charge. The man in charge wants him to be back in charge, I see. Your Ed says he needs your advice. You're a greybeard. He wants you on side and like you're back in the shadow cabinet.
I didn't read that.
No, it's not out till tomorrow.
All right, OK.
What would your answer
You
be?
heard it here first.
Yeah, what's your answer?
That's very interesting. I'll talk to Mr. Dimbleby about it also.
Let's have a question from Roger Preston, please.
Are we wise?
Just before I do that, I should mention, actually, I ought to have said this. I mean, you're all here to talk about it, but if at home you want to join this debate, don't forget you can, of course, join us either texting or by Twitter. Hashtag BBCQT. We have our guest panellist, which is an experiment we've been trying, and tonight it's Jonathan Isaby of the Taxpayers Alliance, and you can access what he says, follow him at BBC Extra Guest, so you can have another argument with him if you want, or you can text your own comments to 83981 and pressing the red button, see what others are saying. Sorry, Roger, let's have your question.
Are we wise to become involved in another Islamist struggle in Mali?
Are we wise to become involved in another Islamist struggle in Mali? Saida Vasi.
Yeah, I think this week there's been a number of questions raised about what it is that we're doing in Mali. How does that fit into the wider Sahel region? Is this going to be another Afghanistan? These are all valid questions which it's right for the public to ask, but these are questions which we ask when we sit around the National Security Council table or the Cabinet table. Can I try and just put into context what is happening in Mali first? The extremist terrorists who for the last 12 months have been moving forward towards the capital, they've been taking over populated areas, have concerned the international community, and last year the United Nations passed a resolution in which it said that the an international force, an African force supported by the international community would go in to give some support to the Malian forces. Unfortunately, things changed very quickly on the ground and the extremist terrorists started to move very quickly towards the capital. And at that point, the Malian government asked the French, and of course there's a big connection with the French because of the colonial history. They came in and for the last week they have had some real success in pushing the terrorists back out of
That's the
some of these
backstory, but
populated
are we wise to become involved is the question.
Well, the way in which we've become involved so far is by, first of all, providing logistical support in the form of two aircrafts which were ferrying items from France to Mali, but also from other African countries to Mali as well.
And now 300 troops training people.
Well, the troops that have been spoken about are in two separate troops. First of all, part of a European Union training mission, and secondly, a set of troops as part of trainers for the African Union forces who will provide the security. I think the only way I can describe this is like Somalia, not Afghanistan. And let me explain what I mean by that. In Somalia, it was felt that the international community should bring to the table what they were good at. And we therefore had a conference here last year. We helped with the political reconciliation. We now have a government in Somalia which has legitimacy across large parts of Somalia after decades of famine and effectively being a failed state. The African Union forces, supported by the UN, provided the security, and then the international community has come in with the developmental aid. This is a problem. The issue of terrorism, extremist terrorism, is an issue for the whole international community. And we therefore have to deal with it as an international community, not as the Western forces against Islam or the Western forces against the East. This has got to be about all of us acknowledging that we cannot allow ungoverned spaces to exist around the world where these extremists can get together and then start to be threats, both to their own populations, but to us as well and our interests overseas.
Ungoverned spaces. James Delingpole.
I think David Cameron takes this heir to Blair role very seriously. I think he saw what Blair did in Sierra Leone and thinks, oh, I'll have a bit of that. I'll get a nice African mini war. They're easy to do. It's okay. They get me popular with. He's just been in Libya, hasn't he? Sort of getting a bit of adulation from the Libyan leadership. I'm not sure that we should be getting involved in these what are potentially quicksand wars. They start off, you send in a few advisors, what we're sending in about 330 at the moment. These things tend to escalate. Fine, if that's what you want to do, have a plan, but don't do it at a time when you are reducing your armed forces. I think the armed forces budget's been cut by something like 8% since the coalition took power. If you really want to go and play this neocon game of fighting mini wars all over the world, and Afghanistan's not a very good example, then you have to have a military budget to do it.
And do you think it's inevitable that things grow, or could it be, I mean, I don't know what 300 or 330 training soldiers actually do. Are they SAS people saying, go around this side of the Wadi and attack those people, or are they people actually saying this is how to fire a gun and this is how... I mean,
what tends to happen is you look at what happened in Vietnam, for example. You had the military advisors going in, and then you have force protection, so you have people going in to protect the military advisors and so on and so forth. And then you get attacks on the personnel, which escalates it further.
The woman up there with the spectacles, yes.
Yeah. Given the point that's just been made by the panellist and the point that was made by Saeed about the unruly areas and the terrorism threat, is it wise to be cutting some 5,000 troops? And would we have enough armed support to actually protect the United Kingdom?
Alan Johnson.
Well, in terms of the original question...
And her.
Yeah, the Prime Minister is wise to go to North Africa with his head of national security, with the head of MI6, and talk about working together, sharing intelligence. That's a very wise thing to do. He was unwise to say the other week in Parliament that would only be tens. The number of troops involved would only be tens, and then the following week put it into hundreds. He was unwise to use the kind of hyperbole about this being almost a war on terror. He almost used those terms, just as Obama in America is saying this is the end of a 10-year period. This is not what the world was like 10 or 15 years ago. Things have changed, and we need diplomacy. We need to change the political situation in Mali. It's a military dictatorship.
But when he says his words that you're referring to, this will require a response that is about years, even decades.
Yeah,
you think that is hyperbole?
I think it is, and I don't think it's in tune with the zeitgeist at the moment. Can I just say one thing about Mali? You know, the thing about Mali, it's a very poor country. America subsidises its cotton farmers to the tune of $5 billion a year. In America, they have 25,000 cotton farmers. That subsidy depresses the price of cotton and means that 10 million West African cotton workers who produce good quality cotton cannot sell it on the open market, and they cannot trade their way out of poverty. There's another dimension to this, as well as the security dimension.
Okay. You, sir?
Yes, I think this is a much bigger issue than just Algeria or Mali. I'm moving to Nigeria in 2 weeks to start work, and there's a huge problem with Boko Haram there. You've got Guinea-Bissau, that's a failed state, that's a transit for drugs coming from South America. Western Sahara is ungoverned no man's land. What you need long-term is for the Arab Spring to push throughout the continent and have good governance throughout Africa, because you've got states that have dictators in power for 20, 30 years. And in today's world, the world has changed. You can't have people impoverished as they are, which leads to rebellions and terrorism.
And what do you think of the government's response?
I think it's just a tiny part of the solution. I think this isn't going to be enough. It doesn't stop at just Mali.
Okay. And the person in the second row from the back there.
We're told that the Islamist jihadist terrorists in Mali, but the Islamist jihadist terrorists in Syria, we're told to support them and their freedom fighters, and we're told to give them diplomatic support, money and weapons. It's just hypocrisy.
The point George Galloway made in the House of Commons yesterday.
Yeah.
Zoe Williams.
Well, look, there's two things going on. The French have gone in. They're fighting an enemy which they say is Islamic fundamentalism, but actually the Islamic fundamentalist element is a parasitic element leeching off a kind of ethno-nationalist element, right? And that's what the Al-Qaeda operatives always do. They go and they try and draw the West into a conflict that is essentially nationalistic. The danger for the French is that, you know, they can think they've taken a city, the rebels look like they've disappeared and they're back the next week, and that's already happened. People have already been shot by forces which the French thought they'd defeated.
So what should have been done by the French?
Well, this is exactly it. I mean, you know, they can't stay there forever. They couldn't...
Should they have gone at all?
They couldn't say no, it's their protectorate, it's their Falklands. They're not just going there frivolously. I mean, they are, you know, they were asked in by the Malians. In terms of us being there, I think we have to have a military alliance with the French because neither of us is large enough to defend any interests with the military we've got. We're the only two nuclear powers in Europe. We're the only two... You know, we have to either support one another or not bother with having a military.
Dom Jolly.
Well, firstly, I'm just astonished that the French are in military action, finally. I mean, it's been, you know... It's been such a long time. I mean, I'm tempted to say Waterloo was probably the last time, but actually, the last time was probably when they went into Algeria. Actually, I think Sir Peter Tapsell said it in Prime Minister Question Time yesterday, and he was mocked by Cameron, but it's actually true. It's like the last time the French were in any sort of serious action. They went into Algeria, sat there for 100 years, basically brought about the end of the Republic, pretty much, and they had to withdraw. And I think that's what's going to happen in all these places. I mean, Zoe's completely right. You go in, what was the big headline? Timbuktu taken without a shot. That's because everyone ran away and just hid, and they're all going to come back. And the size of that place is insane. You've got Niger, you've got Chad. It's just unwinnable, and I don't know what we're doing there at all.
I think for people like me, Nick Clegg, Andrew Lansley, many of us who sit around Ken Clarke, who sit around that cabinet table, we were hugely anti-war. I took to the streets over the war in Iraq. I had huge reservations about what we were about to do in Afghanistan. But we have an international responsibility. The answer to every dispute around the world is not Western troops on the ground. It's not about Western combat troops. It's about, as an international community, intelligently and patiently working through and working out what we can bring to the table and how we can help these countries, which are ungoverned spaces, where there are deep-rooted issues around poverty, about territory, about disputes around land. It's important that we work as an international community, but with regional support. I think where governments, and you know, Alan will probably accept this, where mistakes were made in the past was that this was seen very much as a Western war against terror, Western interventionism. This is not like that. This is actually about saying to the local African Union, we will support you as an international community, we will help you with training, we will help you with resourcing, you have to manage the security. But what we are good at, whether that's intelligence gathering, development work, work in relation to political reconciliation, we need to be at the table because this is all our problem and we need to resolve it together.
Dom Jolly, does that change your view at all?
No.
Briefly.
Yeah. Can I suggest that instead of wasting 0.7% of our GDP on pointless aid ventures, and instead of wasting the lives of our service personnel, it would be much better to engage in trade with Africa. I mean, I think part of the problem, as Zoe pointed out, is that it's not just caused by Islamism, it's also caused by poverty. People need a better standard of living. That is frustration that makes them, you know, take money to fight for various causes. We should be engaging in trade.
Okay. I'll take one more point and then I'll go on. The man in the fourth row, you say yes.
Hi. I think there's definitely a need to instill some political stability in Mali. However, I think we're going about it the wrong way. I mean, as far as I know, the UK set no exit date for taking its troops out of the area, and the style with which the Islamists fight, almost guerrilla-like, where they'll stay to the mountains. They won't stay in large open spaces like Timbuktu. I just feel it'll be a continual drain on the UK's resources until we can no longer support it.
OK, thank you very much. We must move on to something nearer home. Helen Rimmer, with a question, please. Helen Rimmer? Yes.
With the Cumbria vote against the nuclear waste dump, is it time the government turned its back on nuclear and backed renewables instead?
Yes, Cumbria, which had been the last place in Britain that was considering having nuclear waste, decided this week that it wouldn't go any further and wasn't going to have nuclear waste. Cumbria, which is just, of course, due north of where we are here in Lancaster. And is that the end of nuclear And should they go back to renewables? Zoe Williams.
Well, I think there was always going to be a problem with the nuclear storage in Cumbria, because if the money and the promises weren't enough, the Cumbrians would say, well, why would we take this kind of blot on the landscape? But if the money and the promises got too much, you'd say, what's the catch? Rightly, because you never know what the catch is with nuclear. I would think... I mean, obviously, I'm in favour of renewables. We've got three problems.
Are you in favour of nuclear?
I'm not as much in favour of nuclear, but I'm not anti-nuclear. But look, you can't tell people to have nuclear waste in their land.
So what do you do with the nuclear waste? How do you keep the nuclear industry
So I think
going?
you keep the industries that people are going to accept, and I don't think it's going to be nuclear.
So you abandon nuclear?
You can abandon it, or you can wait until you've got a better storage system. I mean, that was the ironic thing about it, was that they were making a million-year promise for how long it was going to take. And it's probably going to be different in 20... It's going to look different in 20 years to how it looks now anyway.
How do you make a problem for 1 million years?
Well, exactly.
Well, where do you store it while you're waiting for the storage
Well,
problem?
exactly. And where do you store it while you're waiting for your million-year lease?
Well, I can't believe anyone turned this down. I mean, it just seems to me, you know, you just think someone comes to you and says, listen, we've got a whole lot of nuclear waste in barrels. Would there be any chance we could bury it under you? Why on earth would you say no? I mean, it's insane. But I do think the Lake District's missed out on this, because if it leaked, you'd then have a fantastic new tourist attraction, which would be the glowing lakes of the district. You could have different colours and whatever. I mean, my option is unfortunately, I'm already in so much trouble, Weston-super-Mare, because I've written about them so much, but they have a huge beach. I think bury in Weston-super-Mare. I think they'd be happy with it, and I think it'd be fine.
The person up there, the one up there, yes.
Perhaps they can combine the two and bury it underneath the new H2 road.
Perfect.
Link.
But this is a serious issue. Saeed Avasi, what's the government going to do about it? You've now got nowhere for your nuclear waste, and you're committed to nuclear.
Well, you can't bury nuclear waste in a community if that community doesn't want it there, and therefore it's right. If we fundamentally believe in localism and the rights of communities, then we have to be prepared to accept that. I'm not an ideologue in relation to how we get our energy, but I am pragmatic. You know, either we use less, and none of us are prepared to do that. If you look at the electrical items we were using 10 years ago to what we're using now, and where the North Sea oil is going down, if you look at the tragedy that's happened in Algeria only a couple of weeks ago, we can't rely upon overseas sources for energy which are stable all the time.
And so
we have to have a whole diverse range of energy.
So
some
what do
of
you
that
do
is
about
nuclear, some of that is nuclear.
But what do you do about nuclear if you can't dump the waste?
Well, this is actually a business decision. People who get involved in nuclear power have to work with communities to make sure that they can actually find a solution to these issues. There are as many challenges with wind farms. There are many challenges with offshore and onshore wind farms. We all know the challenges that happen when people try and put them up. There are challenges with tidal.
I mean, there's divided opinion about wind farms. You're not saying it's as dangerous to have,
of course
except
not.
for the one that collapsed this week. And if you'd been under it, you'd have been struck dead. But you're not saying that nuclear waste is on a par with wind farms just making noise.
Of course I'm not. But what I am saying
So what do you do about nuclear? That's the question.
What I am saying is that as far as local communities are concerned, whether that's a wind farm or whether that's nuclear or whether that's any other form of energy that's being built in their backyard, they have a right to say whether or not they want it there. And therefore we have to be prepared to say that when communities come back, and this was the initial consultation phase with the councils, when communities come back and say, no, this is not going to work for us, this is not what we would like because the package that's been put together doesn't work.
But Helen's question was whether the government should now turn its back on nuclear.
No, it shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
No,
okay.
it shouldn't.
The man in the checked shirt, should the government turn its back on nuclear now?
I was just interested in where Baroness Worsey thinks she's going to find a community that does want a nuclear deal.
Germany. Germany has its own keeps its own nuclear waste in a great pile of salt.
But they keep their own, but do they want ours?
Well, if you paid them.
Yeah, maybe.
James Dalrymple.
I think it's odd that we're having this...
Delingpole.
Yes,
I call you Dalrymple.
Delingpole, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
It's odd that we're having
this
this conversation about renewables in Lancashire, where we are sitting on top of some of the world's biggest shale gas reserves. This is going to transform Britain's energy economy with energy that is actually abundant, relatively cheap, and does not destroy the landscape like these ghastly wind farms do.
So you're in favour of fracking, doing that?
Fracking, yeah. And I think it's time we had a grown-up discussion about the energy in this country, which we're not having now. Now we have a coalition with the Liberal Democrats, who are green ideologues, committed to more expensive energy and committed to renewables, like perhaps the lady up there. Renewables have several problems, one of which is that they are exceptionally expensive, another of which, in the case of wind, which is they only work about a third of the time when the wind chooses to blow at the right level. Otherwise, they are a monstrosity. They destroy the landscape, they kill birds and bats.
They ruin Donald Trump's golf courses.
They ruin Donald Trump's golf courses. They kill property values.
Do you think the government should turn its back on nuclear or not?
No, no, absolutely not. I think the French have shown very successfully that you can make nuclear power work. I think that the people who were trying to sort of sell this nuclear waste did a very, very poor job of it. I'm sure that they could have made a much better case.
OK, you, sir.
If the problem is finding a community that we need to, allow us to dump the waste in, why don't we just find somewhere where there isn't a community? You've got massive deserts where no one lives in and there's not a lot of animal life, so why don't you just put it there? No one's going to have a problem.
And the man too behind you, you, sir.
I agree with what James was saying. We're exploring the shale gas under the Fylde coast. There are risks associated with that which we're accepting. I think we do need a grown-up debate about where we're going to get our energy from in the future. There is no doubt that fossil fuels won't last forever. We need to combine sustainable together with nuclear. We can't afford to turn our back on nuclear energy.
I think, but even with shale gas, what's really important is that the communities here will benefit from that and should benefit from that. For me, the issue is whether it's nuclear and where it's put and where the waste is put, whether it's energy in relation to green energy or fracking, it is absolutely vital that the communities who are affected are compensated and the communities where it is found get the benefits of it.
Alan Johnson.
Well, there is a community that says they'll have it, which is Copeland District Council, voted overwhelmingly that they'd have it there. The question that Helen asked was...
So why can't Copeland have it? Because Cumbria has gone against it.
It's too small, it's already got Sellafield.
And it's part of Cumbria. But Helen's question was, should the government abandon nuclear and concentrate on renewables? They need to do both. There's a very important contract announced today off the coast of East Yorkshire where Dong, Danish oil and natural gas company, are going to spend £1 billion developing what's called Westernmost Rough field out off the coast of East Yorkshire. And there are millions of jobs now being created manufacturing wind turbines onshore and offshore. I don't think anyone who's looked at this sensibly, including the Lib Dems who were against nuclear energy before they came into government, and then a Lib Dem minister, both Chris Hume and Ed Davey, have both said that it's crucial that we have an element of our electricity generated through nuclear. And I think that's right. We want to keep the lights on. If we want to get CO2 emissions down, nuclear power has to be part of the solution to that.
OK. You say. Yes.
I just want to pick up on something that James mentioned there about wind power being ghastly and the sight of it. I think the fact that a wind farm, when it's decommissioned, will take only a matter of weeks to take down is far more favourable than the fact that we are still decommissioning Calder Hall at Sellafield right now, and that was decommissioned years ago.
OK. And the woman in the third row from the back, yes. That's you, yes.
To get back to the question of Cumbria refusing this offer,
yes.
What are the government going to do now? Are they going to renegotiate and spend more money to tempt some area to take this?
What is the government going to do?
Well, this has been a local negotiation, and of course, it hasn't even got to the stage of planning. It's literally been a consultation, and now they're going to have to move on to see where else they can consult in relation to the long-term planning of where they put this.
But that was the last place left, wasn't it?
How big an area do they need?
No, I'm not sure it was.
Yeah,
how big an area do they need? Because I mean.
Are you offering your garden?
Well, I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, how big is it? What are we offering?
3 square miles minimum.
Oh, right. That's
The problem...
very impressive.
Yeah.
And how much for that?
Up to... yes. Yes, you, sir.
Could we possibly not export it to Scotland and then give them their independence?
We're going away,
On which chauvinistic note, let's go on to another question. This is from Columbus Scallon, please. Columbus Scallon.
Should Prince Charles ask the Queen to go Dutch?
Dom Jolly. This, of course, is the Queen of the Netherlands who's standing down, retiring, as did her predecessor and her predecessor's predecessor.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I have no knowledge of the Dutch royal family's history, but I thought it was quite sweet in a way that she did it on her 75th birthday. I think it's kind of neat. But I think, I don't know, I just feel when you look at Prince Charles and you think however sort of reformed he is or he's got nice, he's just, it's been going on for so long, it sort of feels a bit like Gordon Brown, really, that in the end, if he got there, it would just all be a terrible disappointment. And I just, I think we should have just been kinder, really, and somehow circumvented the whole thing and told him, you know, a couple of years ago that it's not going to happen, shuffle off, do some gardening, and we're going to go, you know, straight to William. And I think everyone would have been happier. But who knows? I don't know. But I think the Queen does a great job, I have to say. So,
Alan Johnson.
It's a great question, and one that I didn't expect, but thinking about it...
Do you work out everything in advance?
I know, well, I try to. I try to think what's coming.
This audience?
No,
what?
no way, not this audience. And not Columbus, was it, who asked the question? Columba. I think it's a matter for Her Majesty. It's not inconceivable that with the amount of time she's dedicated to this role over so many years that she feels she would like to, much like Queen Beatrice did, have a rest. That's entirely a matter for her. I'm a big fan of Prince Charles. I've got nothing against Prince Charles at all. I'm very pleased that in Parliament we're going through the process of ensuring that it does not automatically pass to the male line and that we bring that particular piece of our constitution into the 21st century. But if Her Majesty wishes to go Dutch, I'm with her.
Okay. Anybody in the audience have a view? You sat up there with spectacles.
Lady.
Surely see, there we go. I said
It's the first one.
Once a programme.
Surely our time would be spent better than talking about this tonight.
Oh, well, why are you
Think of
talking
much better
about it
things
then?
to talk about.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't have put your hand up. James Delingpole.
I know this may well cost me my knighthood, but I'm not a big fan of Prince Charles. I think the Queen is totally fantastic. She totally understands what it is to be a constitutional monarch, and it is not to make provocative, outspoken remarks. We never really know what she thinks. She's just the Queen. She's there for us. She's there for all of us. I worry that Prince Charles takes far too many explicitly political positions, particularly on issues like climate change, which he knows nothing about. He just gets the rubbish fed to him by Al Gore, and he goes around in his biofuel-powered Aston Martin lecturing us how to live our lives. I'm not looking forward to when he takes over, and I hope the Queen rules forever, or at least until Wills can take over.
OK. And Saida Vassi.
Well, I completely disagree with James. I think Prince Charles is a deeply thoughtful, intelligent man, and we should be incredibly proud of the work that he's done on so many fronts. I mean, I know him from the work that he's done in relation to community cohesion, and the amount of work he's done in bringing different faith communities together is really commendable, and we should be incredibly proud of the work that he does. I don't think, you know, the Queen has just had a tremendous year. We've just celebrated the Jubilee, which, you know, she's going strong. She's a massive, iconic figure for us and a great advert for us all around the world. And I think I can't see her stepping down, and I wouldn't like her to step down.
OK. And you, sir?
I think the Queen is a great ambassador for this country, as it was displayed last year at the Jubilee celebrations. But Prince Charles is actually a great supporter of Lancashire, especially East Lancashire. And he has been up here on numerous occasions supporting local projects over towards Burnley. But like you say, if she wants to carry on, let her carry on. She's a great ambassador for this country, and we should be happy to support her.
OK. And there's a hand up there. A second row from the back, yes. And then come
I
to you,
fully
Zoe.
accept that the Queen is very hard-working, but what I would like to ask is, when will we, the British people, be ever given a choice as to whether we want monarchy?
Right.
2019.
We'd like it tied in with the EU referendum or something. And oh, by the way,
Why not? By 2017, we could have a long debate about it.
Right. OK. Zoe.
I'm afraid I agree with the lady.
Which lady? The one who didn't want to say
The very
anything?
ladylike lady.
Yeah.
I don't care who's the monarch.
So you
It
don't
could be
want to...
any one of them.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We can move swiftly on then, and you'll be pleased that we're leaving the topic and go on to something different. Let's take this question from Chris Stoves, please.
Should
Chris
Nick Clegg
Stoves.
send his children to private schools?
Should Nick Clegg send his children to private schools? Obviously not a question just about Nick Clegg, but about the whole issue of private schools, which have been coming under attack, or indeed been trying to defend themselves this week, with headmasters saying people who go to private schools are unfairly treated, headmistresses or head teachers going off to Switzerland because they say it's too painful to be defending yourself all the time, and Nick Clegg saying that he would make a choice. It's not about whether it's private or public, it's about what's best for your child. So the whole issue of private education. James Dellingpole, you kick off on this one, would you?
Why did you pick on me, I wonder?
No idea. You haven't started one before?
No.
Is there a reason why I should?
Well, no, I wrote a piece the other day in the paper saying why it's wonderful sending children to boarding school and why it's a jolly good thing.
So I don't read everything you write.
Oh. You said you were going to be nice to me as a fellow Christchurch man, and now you're knifing me. I have no problem whatsoever with MPs sending their children, giving their children the best education in the world, provided that they do not endorse. What I can't stand is hypocrisy. When you get a certain kind of, particularly among Labour MPs, I'm sure Alan Johnson isn't one of them, where they sneer at the private system up until the point where it comes to darling little Johnny, and suddenly they change their tune and they send them off to private school. I mean, there's nothing wrong with private schools. They shouldn't need defending, and yet it seems that they're constantly discriminated against by university admissions, tutors and so on, because of this new sort of fairness policy that we get imposed on us by the coalition, unfortunately. But, you know, I mean, I'm not sure what Nick Clegg's position is on private schools, but I think he's perfectly entitled to give his son an education.
OK. Newson.
In terms of Nick Clegg's role, you know, he will say he believes in the comprehensive system, you know, he will try and influence legislation regarding it, and then for him to not send his kids to a comprehensive school, it seems like he doesn't have any faith in it, and that sort of seems poor.
Like using the NHS and not using private if you're in the health ministry?
Well, I think lots of, you know, people, perhaps like David Cameron, they use the NHS, they send their kids to comprehensive schools. At least it shows that they believe in the system and that they have a stake in the system.
OK. Alan Johnson.
It's up to Nick Clegg where he sends his children. Is there an issue about private schools? I think there is, actually. I mean, in politics, you deal with what's possible, the art of the possible. There was a time during the Second World War where there was a feeling in this country around the time of the Butler Act when we should get rid of this system where one group of people are educated in a completely different system. And it doesn't happen in many other countries, and I think the gap between state education and private education is one of the most pernicious dividing issues in our country. If you look at if you look at the judiciary, if you look at the senior echelons of the armed forces, if you look at the current cabinet, you'll find that it's that small percentage of children that went to private schools. I'm not blaming their parents, I'm not blaming them. They have no choice about what school they go to. I think me and Saida are the only state-educated panellists here. But if you listen to the Sutton Trust that dedicates their time to giving a chance to disadvantaged kids, they will tell you that this issue is a big problem in this country. It's probably one too big for politicians to tackle because of the dealing with the art of the possible. But I do think the gentleman there's got a point. How can you talk about state education when you never sent your kids anywhere near it?
OK. The person four rows down. You, yes.
I think that parents are always going to want to send their children to the best school they possibly can. And if they think that paying for it is the way that they're going to get it for their children, then I see no problem with that. I went to a comprehensive school. I had the best education, I think. I got to an amazing university. I think if the parents want to send them to a private school and can, then I don't think there should be an issue.
OK. The man there in the second row from the back.
I would imagine Nick Clegg doesn't have any confidence in the state system because we currently have an education secretary that doesn't have a clue what he's talking about.
Here we go. I wanted to...
John Jolly.
I hate this question so much.
Why?
Well, for loads of reasons. I mean, firstly, I do feel badly for any politician that has this because I do believe that in some ways you know, your family life should be separate from whatever. But on the other hand, if you're promoting a certain policy, it does seem very hypocritical if you don't send your kids to that system that you're advocating. I mean, I went to a private school. My private school was insane. It was a place where it was set up basically to train people to run India. So when India became independent in 1949, there must have been a meeting at some stage where they said, well, what now? And they just thought, well, let's carry on. So I'm fully trained to run India, should it come. It won't come at all. And I now live, my kids are just at this stage where they could go to either, we're equidistant between a really good comprehensive and a public school, and everything in me and my Canadian wife is going, why on earth would we pay money to send your kids there when we can go to a perfectly good comprehensive? But I'm sort of brought up in this system which tells me that I should. So I don't know. I just wish we had... I wish we did abolish public schools, personally, I have to say. I don't think it does any good.
You, sir?
The Labour Party would have gone further than private schools and closed grammar schools as well. Lancaster has a boys and girls grammar school, and we've had fantastic education.
State-funded or paid?
State-funded, but still grammar schools, which were on the list for abolition, and they've given fantastic education to this town for hundreds of years.
And they're still state-funded?
And they're still, yeah.
And you?
Well, I was lucky and I actually went to a private school. My mum made a great amount of sacrifices to send me to it. And why should we penalise that? We should be proud of the fact that people make great sacrifices to take us to private schools, which are some of the best in the world. And we should be proud of the fact that we have some of the best schools in the country.
And do you feel like what this headmaster, Anthony Selden, said, that private schools, the hatred of private schools is a hatred that dare not speak its name? In other words, do you find a prejudice against you for being in a private school?
Yes, I think there is, and there was in the Olympics as well. There was all this penalisation of, you know, the fact there are too many athletes from private schools. Well, should it matter? It should matter. It should be about ability. It should not be about your background. And I think people who come from privileged backgrounds do tend to be penalised on the grounds that they are from those backgrounds.
Zoe Williams.
OK. I don't know where to start with that one, so I'm going to stick with Nick Clegg. The thing is, he said the private school system was toxic and divisive. He actually said that out of his mouth. So the question of whether or not he's a hypocrite is ridiculous. Of course he's a hypocrite. There is no such thing as a political belief that doesn't affect your personal decisions. There is no such thing as politics for other people's children. You can't make laws so that other people hold them. It's ridiculous. What I find even more problematic about the way politicians do this is that it kind of catastrophises the state system, because it says, oh, you know, the state system is actually so bad that we have to betray our principles because our children come first. It's a shame, but, you know, the state system is so terrible that we can't be expected as parents to do anything else. And the result of that, over time, has been for perfectly good state secondary schools to be painted as complete sinks because of people like Nick Clegg, but also, you know, Diane Abbott and all the rest of them. I just think it's disgusting.
Do you think it's always said that it would be impossible to abolish, because it's against the UN Declaration of Human Rights, to abolish private education. Do you believe that?
Well, I always notice the people who call for it to be abolished are the people who are really conflicted about, because they want to send their kids there, but they know it's wrong, but they want to send their kids there. I don't care whether they're abolished or not. If people want to send their kids there, that's between them and their conscience, but don't then govern us.
You say in the middle there, the watch strap sticking up in the air, yes.
How many MPs would actually choose to send their children to private school? It's not
It's what stops them is the fear of the political flak, as so fantastically shown by Malcolm Tucker and Nicola Murray in the thick of it.
Sayeeda Warsi.
Yeah. I think, first of all, let me start with Nick Clegg. I think one of the things that Nick has done is he's kept his family completely out of politics. His wife stays out of politics, his children stay out of politics, and I think we have to be incredibly careful that we start encroaching on people's personal lives, unless, of course, they start putting their personal lives into the public domain. And I think ultimately it's got to be a decision, a private decision for him and his wife. But I think what people like to see in politics is just genuine authenticity, just being straight about what you're going to do. If you're going to send them to private school, be straight about it. If you're going to send them to state school, send them to state school. We've got 5 kids. I've got 5 wonderful kids. 3 of them went to state school, 2 of them went to independent schools, 1 of them went to a faith Muslim independent school.
That makes
1
6.
of them went to a... No, no.
7.
You've got a spare. Of the 5, 1 of them went to a faith Muslim independent school, 1 of them went to an Anglican convent school. You know, me and my husband went to comprehensive schools. Well, so what? As long as you're prepared to say, this is the way it is. We made choices for our different children and it works for different children. I think where the public get annoyed is if you try and be something that you're not. And that's why it's just good to be straight. But I also think if we decide, like I've decided, to keep my family out of politics, then I think people should stay out of our family lives.
OK. But the person over there on the right, yes.
I'd just like to say to the gentleman over there that the discrimination I suspect people who've gone to private school feel is nothing compared to the discrimination you feel if you haven't had a good education and you can't read and write and you have to stand in the job centre and be humiliated and degraded on a daily basis. I'm sure it is a real discrimination, but I just don't think it's comparable.
We've got 5 minutes left. Let's take a last question from Simon Noble, please.
Polish is now the second language in the UK. Will we need to revise this to Bulgarian or Romanian next year?
Yes, this figure came out that nearly 500,000 people in England, in Britain, I should say, now speak Polish, and the number of people learning French and German is falling. The number of people learning Polish is going up. Alan Johnson, how do you interpret this? And obviously the question's about Bulgarian and Romanian immigration next year.
Poland's a much bigger country, and I think I've got lots of Polish friends. There has to be a second language. I think Welsh is actually, if you take England and Wales, and Poland comes first. And anyone could speak, comes second. Anyone could speak Polish. Deserves my full admiration because it's a very difficult language to speak. Will this happen with Romania and Bulgaria? And this is the issue, I think, about January 2014. You know, if I was the EU Commission, I would seek to find a way to put that decision back by 4 or 5 years. And I'll tell you why. It's not about an issue of being anti-immigrant. My concern is that if they lift that restriction, then Romania will lose a lot of, and Bulgaria will lose a lot of their finest talent. I would like to see in the European Union some kind of GDP measure that says once you've reached that GDP measure, once your country is at a certain level of prosperity, that's when free movement kicks in. Because if you do that, you can ensure that countries coming into the European Union, who by definition are usually much poorer and take time, that's why there's 7 years, one of the reasons why there's 7 years is there, that there's actually a chance to extend that for the sake of that country as well. I think in terms of what happened with the Polish population coming here, history's being rewritten. In 2004-05, I was a minister at the time. We had a highest rate of employment ever known in this country, and we had 600,000 vacancies. The reason why us, Sweden and Ireland all lifted that restriction early is because our economy and our employers told us it was necessary to do that. Yes, it's right, more people came than was expected. That won't happen.
Ed Miliband said it was a mistake. You don't think it was a mistake?
That won't happen this time.
Do you think it was a mistake or not?
I don't think... I disagree with Ed in terms of... I think in hindsight, you would have a better grasp of the numbers. If you knew that many number was coming, then you'd look at it again.
All right. Dom Jolly, we have to be rather swift here because we're coming towards the end.
I mean, I sort of get what this question is basically about, is, you know, are we going to allow people to come into this country? And people, there seems to be there was something sort of a bit pernicious about saying, oh, Polish is suddenly the second biggest language. I mean, I have a problem, I think, with sort of ghettoisation. If people come in and don't learn English and kind of don't assimilate. But to me, Polish is, I mean, A, the most complicated language in the world, so anyone can speak it, fantastic. But I think most Poles speak English anyway, so I don't see it as a particular problem. I hope there will be possibly slightly more control on Romanian and Bulgarian coming in, because I think I have no problem with people coming in who are actually going to work, but I think if people are coming in supposedly to sponge off us or whatever, then I think maybe there should be some more controls. But
Do you think it would be possible, Saida Varsi, to have controls of the kind Alan Johnson's just suggested, that the European Union might itself temper the pace of immigration? Is that on the cards?
It's the kind of thing we're actually looking at the moment, because currently we can have transition provisions for 7 years, which basically means you can delay a country's citizens coming in and exercising their right to free movement for a period of 7 years. But I think Alan is right. We need to look at how these countries can be at a certain level before their citizens start moving around. I think this will be very different, though, to the Polish situation. One, because we did apply these transition provisions for 7 years, as did lots of other European Union countries, and they're all going to come off at the same time. So if people do want to travel, they'll have the option to travel to other countries. And traditionally, I think the Bulgarians and the Romanians have travelled to warmer climates. They preferred Spain really over the United Kingdom.
Okay.
But I think that in terms of the language question that was asked, I mean, Polish is the second, Punjabi is the third, and Urdu is the fourth. So, you know, we've got a diverse set of languages in this country, and we should celebrate it.
I just think that the dialogue that we have about immigration is fundamentally flawed. Like, all of the newspapers that say that they come here and scrounge off our country, immigrants bring into our economy £1.2 billion more than they take out in benefits. When will a paper start printing a fact like that?
Sarah Williams, briefly to them.
I want to ask a question. Is there any truth in the rumour that the government's putting together posters to stop Bulgarians coming to the UK?
There is no truth in that rumour.
There's
Sorry,
no
can you
truth.
say that again? We didn't hear it here. He was whispering the reply.
There is no truth in the rumour that we are about to put some posters out in Bulgaria and Romania.
Because it's not a rumour, it's true, or because you're not doing it?
But if you were, what would they be?
Yeah, what would they say?
Piers Morgan lives here.
Has it been discussed in Cabinet?
So he doesn't.
It hasn't been discussed in Cabinet, and if they are doing it, I certainly don't know about it.
You're not allowed to reveal what's been and not been discussed in Cabinet, but
Well, you
neither
should have
did
asked me then.
No, you shouldn't have answered. James Dellingpole.
Migration Watch, whose predictions I trust more than the government's, reckon that from January 2014 we're going to get 50,000 Bulgarians and Romanians coming in for the next 5 years. So that's the population of Lancaster coming in every year. I think we need to go further than this non-existent movie that you're making. I think we need to stage an anti-Olympics to try and put people off coming to Britain. I think we could have Dom Jolly doing the diving. We could have Polly Toynbee running the stand-up comedy tent. We could serve horse meat burgers.
Or you tweeting.
And or me tweeting. And even then, I fear it would not work, because when you've got people on a fifth of the average wage that we are over here, this is a very attractive country. And I think until we get out of the EU, there is nothing we can do about it.
OK. We've got to stop. Our hour's up. Thank you very much. Sorry for those of you who had your hands up still, but you should come to Stirling, where we're going to be next week. Have another go. We're going to be in Stirling next week. The week after that, we're going to be in Leicester. So if you'd like to come and join the audience, you can apply. The website address is on the screen there, or call us 0330 123 99 88. My thanks to our panellists here and to all of you who came here to Lancaster, to this wonderful building full of lovely marble and great panelled oak and goodness knows what. It's a sensational place. Anyway, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for coming, and from all of us on Question Time until next Thursday in Scotland. Good night.
Well, with that, Alan Johnston, Alistair Campbell joins Michael Portillo and Andrew Neil for This Week in just a moment here on BBC One.